Good morning. My name is Alberto Castro, and I work as an infrastructure software engineer in Konica Minolta right now in Windsor, Connecticut. And this is introduction to Terraform and Terraform modules at the NERD Summit. First thing I want to ask, just a show of hands, just to, Heidi, if you can help me with this, if people can just in the chat say how much experience they have with AWS. So it's like novice, have worked a little, or have worked a lot, just to get a sense of how much detail I need to put into the AWS part, which is not Terraform, but those are the examples I'm going to use. So while you do that, let me begin because we only have a few minutes. So Terraform. So what is Terraform? So first thing is that in the introduction of this talk, I wrote what Terraform says, what they are. One of the things to say is that Terraform is a tool for building, changing, and versioning infrastructure safely and efficiently. So let's break that down. So what's mean to build, change, and versioning? It means that we have infrastructure as code that can be managed with Git. Or, well, if you want to use Mercurial or something else, you can do that too. The important thing is that it's code. Safely and efficiently, and here's an important piece that I'm going to talk more about later on, which is that Terraform maintains a state. So the state of the infrastructure is what the Terraform, how Terraform has left infrastructure. And then changes are applied considering what's the state that Terraform produced before and what is the state that you want to get it to later. And the changes are managed by Terraform in a non-conflicting manner. So in other words, if one resource, let's say an EC2 instance, requires a security group, is a, sorry, let me translate. EC2 instance is a virtual machine, and security group would be a firewall. So, and if EC2 instance may need to know which firewall or security group is assigned to it, then Terraform will create first the security group and then the EC2 instance. So Terraform takes care of all those things. We just need to say what's there. There's some cases where you need to be very specific which goes first, but in general, Terraform does a really good job of that. So let me go back to here. Okay, that will be all. So now this is an example of something we're going to hopefully at the end get. This is not by any means production ready software, but let's just see what's in here. So we have, sorry, software infrastructure. So first we have a VPC, a virtual private cloud, which is a local network of our infrastructures that is deployed on AWS in this case. We have an internet gateway, which is how calls get routed in and out of the VPC. We have web servers, and there could be other servers there. We have a public subnet where these web servers are located. A public subnet is a subnet of the network there that is connected to the internet gateway. That's what makes it public. And we have an EC2 security group, which in this case is simply just allow you to, what are the rules for connecting to different things? In this case, we're going to be very lenient. We're also going to allow, I didn't show it there, an SSH connection to a machine that you may use to log into this EC2 instances. We also have an Amazon DynamoDB database and bucket, an S3 bucket with objects. The IAM role actually there is a construct of IAM, which is identity and access management in AWS, that allows the EC2 instance in this case to access DynamoDB and S3. Now, these are all objects that are created in AWS. But Terraform can manage all these and create them, and we're going to see how that works. Now, before we continue, I should have said this at the beginning. Terraform modules are some people say that there, I mean, I've heard over there that it's kind of an advanced topic. My position on that is that it's kind of a basic topic, that it permeates everything in Terraform. Every single thing that you write essentially is a module. You can choose to write everything in one module, it's like you can write everything in one function. But in general, it's better to have more than one, and that's the idea here. Now, very quickly, we're going to go through the Terraform configuration for AWS. This is mostly here for people that may want to do this later on at home. But I'm going to indicate what needs to be done. It's not difficult. You first install Terraform, downloading it from the downloads page in Terraform.io. You install the command line interface in your computer. So this is AWS CLI. There are links that I'm going to provide in the repository. There's a link to a repository in the description of this course, of this talk. To configure Terraform, create a user in AWS using identity and access manage. I named it Terraform just because I'd like to use different users, not just my user. Use a specific user for this thing. So that way, if something happens, for any reason you think the credentials were compromised, you just remove the user or just disable the keys for that user. So it's always a good practice to create different users for different use cases. And in our case, we're going to just assign full administration permissions to a user. That's not required. In fact, it's probably a best practice not to do that, but it's the easiest thing to do when you're just playing with this tool. When you have a very secure environment, you may want to be very tight about that. You download the access keys and you write AWS configure, you enter all the information and you're all set. You're all set to use Terraform. So what's Terraform basic use? So I'm going to just delineate this. I'm going to start with an example, believe it or not. So here, we're just going to create Terraform file and directory in your computer, run Terraform init, which is going to bring all the resources that Terraform is going to require to build this infrastructure. Then run Terraform plan, which just checks what needs to happen. It's going to tell you this is what I'm going to do. And then say Terraform apply, answer yes. It's going to show you again the result of the plan, and you should say yes then. Before it would just run the script, which was not a good idea, because if you had no plan and you just said Terraform apply and it was, you could get in trouble there. And finally, once you're done with this, you say Terraform destroy, and we're going to destroy all the infrastructure. So I'm going to go through all these in the first basic example. So let me go back to here. So the examples are divided in fact in several different, they're progressive. So the first example here has three, see here, has two drafts and one final example. The first example is this one. So let's decipher these. So what is a provider? A provider says, okay, I'm going to, Terraform says, I want to write, I want you to, sorry, you tell Terraform that you want to do work in AWS, and AWS is a provider of Terraform. There's a modular design that Terraform has that we're going to go through that later. Then you tell in which region you're going to deploy your resources. AWS is divided in several regions. US East 1 is the Northern Virginia region. And then you tell which version of Terraform you want. Here in this case, it's 2.39 or higher. Now you say, okay, I want to build an AWS instance, which is an EC2 instance or virtual machine. I'm going to give it a name. My app is the name that you're going to use inside your Terraform scripts to name this instance. You provide an AMI, which tells the AWS what type of instance you create. AMI is Amazon Machine Image. The instance type is the size of the server. In this case, it's T2 micro. It's a small general purpose server. And the key name is a key pair name. I'm skipping this little piece. I mean, I created manually a key to log in, and I added it here. If time permits, I'm going to log in to this, or maybe I can just do it right in this example and then skip it everywhere else. And finally added this tag, just so we can start seeing what are the names of these different resources we create. Okay, so let's move on to, I'm going to open a terminal here, and I'm going to go to example 1, draft 1. And first I need to say Terraform init. And Terraform is just downloaded some information, and Terraform has been initialized. Now, if we look at what happened here, we see that Terraform downloaded some information, some code, and it's actually the code that corresponds to the provider for AWS. Okay, so we're ready to say Terraform plan. Oops. Plan, no plan. Okay, so this is important to look a little bit. So this is the first plan we're going to see. We're going to see lots of plans, but let's look at these in carefully, and then later on we're just going to skip through them. So here we say, okay, Terraform says I'm going to create this thing, an AWS instance that you call my app. This is the AMI that I'm going to use, which is the value that I enter there. Then the ARN, the Amazon resource number, is going to be known after we create it, etc. So there's a lot of information here that's going to be known after we create the instance. Some things we know because they're defaults. Get password data is going to be false. We're not going to get a password data, etc. This is the key. This is the type of the information. Sorry, the type of the server. Sorry about that noise. It's a copy and paste. Source test check true. Remember what that is. And here's the tag. We're going to add this tag, which is a label essentially that we add to a resource. Then information about the EBS volumes and lots of other things. Now here we're not specifying networking, we're not specifying the volume, we're not specifying anything. So there are a lot of defaults that are going to be applied here. But as a first example, it's good because we have a very, very short code here and we can create something. So I'm going to say Terraform apply. And as you can see here, it showed the same thing that we had before. So it says, okay, this is what I'm going to create, just in case you forgot. And then here you say yes. It's important you type exactly yes. If you type anything else, it's going to stop it. So, and here we're going to wait a couple of minutes and see. So now it's creating an instance, my app. And let's go to the console. So I open a console before in the account where I'm deploying this. And I'm looking at the running instances. And here we see that there is an instance that is getting created, which is the one we just created. So let's look again at the directory that we had in where we had the draft directory. We see something new here. So we see now Terraform state. So once this is finished, okay, now it's finished. Apply complete, resources 1 added, 0 changed, 0 destroyed. We can look at the Terraform state. Cancel. I'm just going to open it as text. It's actually JSON. And here you see information about what we did. So here it says, well, this is what I did, the lineage. So this is a private API that Terraform maintains. So you should look at it, but never, ever, ever touch it. So here's the ARN, the Amazon resource number of this thing here. Here's a lot of other information, but here we see that the information is filled. So this is the information that we actually finally got from the instance and was filled into this resource here, to this resource description. There are even things like the VPC security group ID. So we have a security group. Where did this come from? In fact, there is also VPC somewhere here. So I want to find it now, but anyway, so you get the idea. So let's go back to the description here. And
excuse me, would it be possible to increase the font size? Very hard
yes.
to read.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, so here we see all the information that we did. So for example, now we have a public DNS and IPv4. So let's see here. So, sorry, I cannot increase the size of this length, this here, but I can increase this one. So if we look at associated public. Okay, so here we have the public IP. There's also private IP, private DNS, and public DNS. So all this was created, but also there is a VPC here. This is the default VPC for your account. When you create an account, you always create a default VPC. And here's subnet in the default VPC, which is a public subnet, etc. So there's a lot of information here that was defaulted, but actually it's here in the state. Okay, we're done with this machine. I'm not going to log in, but we're done with this machine, but you can log in using something like SSH, and then actually, since I'm going to type it, might as well. Terraform nerd EC2 user at. And here I need to add the public IP. I'm going to copy it and paste it. And here we have our instance. So okay, so we're done here. Now let me probably should use this this instead. It's a little. Is this font a little more readable here? So So here I'm destroying the EC2 instance. This is the last time I'm going to destroy anything in this talk. But normally when you work and do examples, you should create something and then review it and destroy it as soon as possible so you don't incur charges. And as you can see here, it tells you, okay, this is what I'm going to destroy. I'm going to destroy this resource that you called my app. And it's going to, so all these things are going to disappear. So do you really want to destroy the same things as this and Terraform apply? You say yes. Okay, well, this happens I'm going to move to, believe it or not, I'm going to move to the, let's see here. I'm going to move to the final example. The second one, the draft example, it's okay. So actually, destroyed took place. This destruction of this thing took place, and now we can see actually something interesting here. Because before, remember that we had TF state contain a lot of information, and now it says, okay, I don't have anything here for you. I destroyed everything. And the state backup actually contains what we had before. So that the previous state before the destroyed is contained here. So let's go back, let's go to the final example of this particular example, of the final exercise, let's say, of this particular example, and see how this changes from, oops, I'm going to close everything here. And we're going to go here to main. Okay, so again, we're going to do an EC2 instance. We're creating a security group here. So let's see, Terraform, when you create something, in general, you say either resource or some other keyword that tells you what you're creating or what information you're getting. Then you tell Terraform what is the type of thing that you're doing, so AWS security group. Then you give it a name, a private name that you're going to use in your scripts. And then you start passing in the parameters. In this case, security group requires a VPC ID, an ingress rule, so it tells you everything is allowing everything in, but also it's allowing calls from TCP port 22, in other words, SSH from, I mean, don't do this, but in general, put your IP here. But this is decider block for the whole internet. So anybody can log into here if they have the credentials. Here again, we have the AWS instance, and we have an AMI, instance type, key name, VPC security group IDs, which is something new. This is the security group that we assign over there, and then the tag. But we have something new here. We have var AMI ID. So var AMI ID and var type and var key name. And also here we have another thing called data, AWS VPC, default VPC ID. So what are all these things? So let's begin with var, which is the simpler example. So it's easier to explain. So what are the variables? So variables essentially are variables, are inputs that you have for your Terraform module. So here we're creating a module. We have variables. The first variable is the ID of the machine image. We have a type, we say it's a type of string, and then we give it a default. So the default actually is in our case is Amazon Linux 2. That's it. Here we have another one here, variable type, and we're not given we're missing the value, the default value. So we're going to see what happens when you miss the default value. And finally, the key name, which is something we had before. We're assigning a key pair for logging in, which is the same one that I had before. We have two other things. So the other one is data sources. And here data sources is, I need to know, and why do I need this? Let me just begin by looking at in the security, when I define a security group, I need to know what is the VPC ID. The VPC ID, we're going to use if I create a VPC, then I can enter the VPC ID of this as a reference or as a value, but I don't know it. And I'm going to use the default VPC. So here's what data sources enter. So Terraform also has another structure. So again, you see here you have a keyword that tells you, okay, this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to do. I'm going to Here I have a resource. In this case, I want to get some data from where? Amazon VPC. And I give it a name. The important part here is this one, default true. It tells you, okay, in the account that you have in the region that you are, I want to know what is the information for this VPC for the default VPC, not for any other VPC. There's one that's the default VPC, and for that one, I want to put the information into this resource. So what information I may need is, for example, the CIDR block, in other words, the range of IPs that I can have into the local IPs, and other information is the ID. And here we have, and just to show you how this works, so here we have data. Oops, sorry. Okay, so if I had different source of data, I would see AWS VPC here or other stuff. Which one? Here may have different lists. And then what is the ID? Now this thing seems very simple, but it's very powerful because sometimes you can pass information just by passing the ID, and then, so for example, you can pass information from one module to another just by passing the ID, and then all that information, all associated information to this particular resource can be gathered, or most of it can be gathered using a data resource like this. And finally, we have outputs. Now, this is useful because before, when we were logging in, we had to go to we had to open the console to get this information. In this case, actually, I don't want to go to the console. I just want to get the data directly. So let me look at how I can, let's see how we can do this. Terraform init is the first. Terraform plan. Okay, so remember that the type of instance it was missing. So here it's asking me for that. Okay, I'm going to say T2 micro. Now, of course, there are hundreds of different choices. That's the one that is in the free tier for your AWS account for a year. So now it's telling you, okay, so I'm looking around to stuff. I'm going to see what I'm going to create. And here it gets more interesting because now we have, it's going to create the following resources. So it's going to create the instance, which is something we knew, and it's going to also create a security group. And again, there's a lot of information there. So, and I'm going to T2. Okay. So while this goes on, I'm going to continue with the presentation. So I'm going to see what the result is in a couple of minutes. Any questions so far? Anything that? Okay, from now on, we're going to go, we're going to look at more background. So homework, if you want to do this, you're welcome to create an AWS account, initialize Terraform, and update the example draft 1 to deploy more than one EC2 instance. So let's talk a little bit about the Terraform architecture. Now you've seen how this thing works. Let's see how it's behind. So Terraform is written in Go, and it's a tool developed by HashiCorp. HashiCorp also has other really, really useful products, for example, Vault and Nomad and Console and Packer, etc. So it's a lot of really interesting products that HashiCorp creates. Terraform is split into a core engine, which is the language itself, which is all this code that that I wrote there is in a particular language called HCL. In fact, it's HCL2, and it's used for all infrastructure types. And now depending on the infrastructure type, you have different providers. So you have a provider for Google Cloud, you have a provider for Azure, you have a provider for Ali Cloud, you have a provider for Oracle Cloud, etc. And each of these has particular resources that you can create. Some people say you can write Terraform for any cloud infrastructure. It's true, but every different cloud infrastructure is going to have different commands because there are some things that are not common. They're different in each cloud, so they account for that. And the AWS Terraform SDK leverages the Go SDK. So what essentially is written is the provider, that particular part, this plugin for AWS is written in Go. So let's talk a little bit about the language. So the language of Terraform is declarative. So as you saw there in the example, what we were saying was, okay, I would like you to, this is what I want. I want an EC2 instance that has this and this and these properties, and that's it. I'm not telling you how you're going to build it. I'm just telling you this is what I want. Or I want a security group, etc. So just specify the final state. So Terraform manages all dependencies. For example, the security group and the EC2 instance, which comes first. I mean, I can change the order of the code. I could put the EC2 instance first and this security group second, but it doesn't matter really, because Terraform is going to say, I need to get the information of the security group first before I create the instance. I'm going to do that. In some cases, you have to still specify and use the keyword it depends on, but in general, Terraform does all that. And the latest version of Terraform uses HCL2, which is a major improvement. So if you see the code for HCL1, it's really, really difficult sometimes to read or to interpret. So if you're starting, just definitely start with HCL2. And every script is its own module. In other words, let's go back to the example here. Let me just look at this. As you can see here, it's fun. Still working on this. We have this whole thing, this and that. All these files correspond to the final module of example 1. So that's a module. We're going to see how we connect modules, and that's the important part. Once we know that, then it's really easy to deploy more infrastructure. So as you can see here, we have a Terraform script, which is our main file, the files we're calling main. We have inputs, which are our variables. We have outputs, which are this information that we're going to get once the module, once the Terraform finishes. We have local variables. We haven't seen them yet, but we can create local variables, and we also have data sources that come from somewhere else. We can also have the iteration. We can have counters or for loops. Iteration is kind of a sticky subject with declarative languages, so it's always a little bit. There's a little bit of a learning curve if you haven't used declarative languages before. And there are all sorts of type structures. So for example, we have primitive types, which are strings, numbers, or Boolean. And this is it's much better now in Terraform in HCL2. We have collection types, which are lists, maps, or sets. In other words, we have lists of all the same type of elements, same thing for maps and sets. And then we have structured types, tuples, which are arrays of different multiple types, and objects, which are maps, completely general maps. And all these types have literal expressions. Let's look at some examples. So for the primitive types, we have, this is a string, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and true. A list would be A, B, Z, or 1, 2, 3, or something like that. A map here, this is a typical construct, you say. One of the problems with Amazon is that the Amazon machine image that corresponds to certain operating systems is not the same in different regions. The AMI is named differently. So here you may use a map to just say, okay, if you are in this region, then use this AMI. If you're in this other region, use this other AMI. So that's and an object is just a combination of all these things. In fact, if you say, if you look at the bottom, it says a tuple, that's a tuple because it's an array of different types. So let's see modules. Of course, it's asking me whether I want to perform these actions, and I said. So if you remember, I got this run. I started running a Amazon apply, and then I was wondering why it's taking so long. And the problem was that we didn't answer yes, which is, I like that. So. Let's see how much time we have. Okay, so we're going to do example 2. All right. So before we do anything here, in example 2, draft 1. So let's see what's going on here. The structure is hard to explain here. Let me just, unfortunately, I cannot enlarge this font. I should have thought of that before. Anyway, so we have the following thing here. We have these 3 files that we had before, these 4 files, data sources, main, outputs, and variables. And we have 2 modules here, EC2 instance and security group. Security group also contains 3 files. So the inputs, outputs, and the code. And the EC2 instance, same thing, inputs, outputs, and your script. Let's look at this one here. So here we're looking at example 2, draft 1. We have a module, which is a web server. We have another module, which is a web security group, and we have the provider AWS. So now here we have a different keyword, module. So module says, okay, I want you to look at the code that is in this directory. I'm going to give you some information that you need because the security group module is going to require some of that information. In this case, I'm passing the VPC ID. And I would like you to put all that information in something called module.webSecurityGroup once you're finished. Same thing here. A module, which is a web server. We tell it where the code is. And we pass some information, the AMI ID, security group IDs, what type of things it is. And in this case, I'm going to also pass a name. Let's see the particular modules in each case. So let's look at first at the web security group. And actually, let me concentrate on the variables first. So before, here we have the web security group, and we have an input, which is this data, AWS VPC, default VPC ID, etc. And that's an input. And if we look at the variables of the security group, here I'm saying, okay, so here we have a variable, and I write a description and I put what is the type. It's a type string. But I'm not providing it. So that means that when I create the module, I need to pass that information directly. The module is going to create a security group. I'm not going to go over how this is done. Just let's just, you can look at the code later, but the important thing is that we're going to have an output. And the output is going to be the AWS security group, this security group ID. So this is an internal thing that says, I'm going to export this value and I'm going to name it security group ID. So how that's useful, because if you look at this in the module web server, there's an input, which is the security group IDs, and it says is this one here. So let's So I need the security group ID of something that I created before. So here it says module dot web security group dot, and it's going to tell me what are the inputs that, sorry, what are the outputs that this module has. Is one in this case is the security group ID, and it's going to create this web server. So let me just run this particular one before we do this. Okay. So I'm going to do cd draft 1 to just increase the font size. So I want to say Terraform init. Terraform plan. And Terraform apply. Say yes here. And while this starts working, let's see what Terraform is going to say it's going to do. So, okay, so it's going to perform the following actions. It's going to create a module, which you defined. Is going to create another module. It's going to the name, etc. And there are different resources that belong to this module, and I'm going to be creating them. So this actually is just the identifier, the internal identifier that Terraform has for the resource that is going to be created. But it's creating different things. It's going to create security group rules, going to create an instance, it's going to create a lot of other stuff here. So meanwhile, it's creating all this. Let's go back to the previous example that we had. If you recall, remember that in one in the final draft, or say in the final example, is the final exercise of example 1, we had some outputs. So when we execute that, we get that information printed here. So why is that useful? Because now, for example, I have the public IP. I don't have to go to the console to get the public IP. But more than that, you can use that information to pass it to different programs. You can use it to, in this case, as you can see in a module, to pass it to a different part of Terraform. So that's one of the powers that that Terraform has in terms of doing everything this way. So are we done? Yep, we're done. So we added 6 resources, 0 changed, and 2 were destroyed. I'm going to reload here. In a second, you can see I have this all these resources that were created. I'm going to finish with the slides, and then I'm going to ask, see if you have any questions, because.
Alberto, you have about 5 minutes left.
I know that. That's
okay.
why I'm finishing with this.
Okay.
So Terraform maintains a file, which is the state, which we talked about that. Initially, Terraform assumes that there's no, that the resources is created do not exist. And as new resources are created. So you have to be careful about applying Terraform to places where you already have stuff. It's possible to import data. So for example, suppose that you have an EC2 instance and say, I would like to manage this with Terraform. It's possible to say, Terraform, look at the information, go read the state of this EC2 instance and put it in your records so we can manage, moving on, we can manage this EC2 instance using Terraform. It is highly discouraged to make changes of the infrastructure after you start maintaining something with Terraform, because again, it's going to conflict with your state. So it's important not to do that. Terraform state stores information about current resources, the parameters and dependencies. And the state can be saved and shared using, for example, Terraform Cloud or an S3 bucket in the DynamoDB for logging. So if you have more than one person, the state can go, in this case, I'm maintaining the state locally, but you can also put it in an S3 bucket and actually work with a colleague. But the problem is that both of you may be running Terraform at the same time. In order to do that, there's a locking mechanism that you can enable using DynamoDB tables. So storing and sharing modules. There's information about the registry. I'm going to skip it here, but it's really important that you go there and look. If you want to learn Terraform, go to the registry and see how people write these things, especially one named Anton Bobenko, which is just one of the most amazing code that I've seen in Terraform. The other very useful way of sharing repositories is by using Git repositories. So for example, you can specify, remember I was saying the source of this module is a directory. I can also specify a Git repository. But I can also specify a Git branch or a Git tag, which is very useful. So Terraform in AWS, I'm going to skip it, but essentially say AWS really embraces Terraform. Many of the features that are available for, I mean, whenever Terraform has, whenever AWS has a new service, Terraform is up to date or is going to be up to date in a couple of weeks or sometimes even before it comes out. How to learn Terraform? Just learn some cloud first. Open a free account. For AWS is free, and the other ones you can also have some money for that. Recreate infrastructure. Create some infrastructure that you play, and then recreate it using Terraform. And here's a list of resources: GitHub repository that I created, Terraform website, Terraform registry, and the current Bible of Terraform called Terraform Up and Running, 2nd edition, which is a really, really good book to learn Terraform. So if there are any questions in the probably 2 minutes that are left, 1 minute is left or no minutes, I'm open to it.
Looks like there's one question. What is the name you mentioned, Anton?
Bobenko. Just look at the, let me see here. So if you look at, so this is the Terraform registry, registry.terraform.io, and look at AWS. Actually, I need to look for VPC. Okay. So you can see here there are different providers, Ali Cloud, AWS, Azure, Google, OCI, Oracle. And let's look at the, I mean, these two are monsters. This is the VPC module, Babenko actually, BA Babenko. And here's a VPC and everything that you can create in the VPC. So this is the kind of code that, and here you can see it's using modules. And this is a module, and this is an example how you can create a VPC with this API, etc. Look at read code. Read code, this is one of the best ways of learning how to use this because it's a relatively new language, but there's some really high quality code, especially in the registry, that you can learn a lot from.
Are there any other questions? All right. Thank you, Alberto.
Feel free to send any Thank you. Feel free to send any pull requests if you find any errors in this repository. I'm building what seems to me is going to be a three-day course in the repository, but I like writing good examples. So if you have any questions or suggestions, please be ruthless. Thank you.